Welcome to the new video of NeuroPhilos. Get ready to dive into a gripping tale that will leave you breathless, thinking, and inspired. Whether you're here for the mystery, the drama, or the unexpected twists, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe so you never miss another powerful story. Let's begin ***, the illusion you're still chasing. You say you want to move on. You say you're ready to forget. You tell yourself the chapter is closed, that the story is over. But if that's truth, then why does their shadow still linger in your mind every single day? Why does your chest tighten whenever your phone lights up, as if a small part of you hopes it's their name on the screen? Why, knowing all the harm they've done, do you still miss them, not just in moments of weakness, but in moments of strength, too? You've memorized the truth. They hurt you. They broke your trust. They're not good for you. And yet, here, you are still giving them free rent in your head? Still letting their ghost walk through your thoughts uninvited. Don't lie to yourself. You don't truly miss them as they miss who you thought they were. You miss the version of them that existed only in your mind. The one you painted in colors they never actually wore. The one who spoke in kindness even when their real voice was sharp. The one who stayed when, in reality, they were always halfway. Out the door, what you're grieving isn't the person, it's the projection. Carl Jung once said, "What we do not face in ourselves, we will find as fate." That means the people we become most entangled with, especially the ones who wound us, are often mirrors, showing us what we've avoided seeing in ourselves. And maybe that's exactly what's happening to you right now. This isn't just heartbreak. This isn't just the end of a relationship. This is a confrontation with the deepest, most hidden parts of yourself. You're not merely missing a partner, you're standing in front of an internal mirror, staring at reflections you've tried to avoid your entire life. The truth is brutal. What many of us call love is often not love at all. It's our unhealed wounds latching onto someone who unknowingly, sometimes knowingly, feeds them. It's our need for validation dressed up as romance. It's our longing for safety projected onto someone who doesn't know how to give it, or worse, never intended to. And because the unconscious mind craves recognition, it will sometimes settle for pain if it can't get love. That's the most disturbing part. Your mind might rather be hurt by them than forgotten by them. This isn't love. This is imprisonment. Think about it. That feeling of anxiety you get when they ignore you. That mix of panic and longing when you think they've moved on. The way your stomach flips when they text after weeks of silence. None of that is coming from a place of true affection. It's coming from something deeper, older, and far more dangerous, your unhealed self calling out for acknowledgement. This is why breakups can feel like a matter of life and death. Because, in some way, your unconscious is convinced that without their attention, you cease to exist. That, without their recognition, you have no proof you're worthy of love. But here's the truth. You've been avoiding this attachment, this pain, this obsessionate, has nothing to do with them. It's not about their charm, their beauty, or their potential. It's about what you have yet to discover within yourself. You're not addicted to the person. You're addicted to the reflection of yourself you think you see in their eyes. You're addicted to the version of you that you believe is lovable only when they approve. And until you face that, you'll keep seeking people who hold the same power over you people, who can make you feel like everything when they're close and like nothing when they're gone. It's easy to believe that healing comes from replacing them with someone new, from distractions, or from pretending you never cared. But that's not healing. That's avoidance dressed as strength. Real healing comes from asking yourself the hard questions. What exactly do I miss about them? Was it truly them more? Was it the way they made me feel, even temporarily? Am I longing for their presence or for the version of myself I was when I thought I had them? When you strip away the romanticized memories, when you look beyond the highlight reel in your mind, you begin to see the reality you didn't want to admit. Much of what you thought was love was simply an emotional pattern seeking completion. Imagine this. You're standing in front of a locked door, believing everything you need is behind it. You knock, you beg, you wait. Sometimes they open the door just wide enough to hand you a crumb of affection, a text, a compliment, a fleeting moment of closeness before closing it again. You keep waiting because those crumbs feel like proof that the feast is real, that one day they'll let you in completely. But that day never comes. And here's the secret they may never tell you. There is nothing behind that door. You've been starving for an illusion. That's why every attempt to move on feels like withdrawal. Because you're not just losing them, you're losing the fantasy. A tear. And fantasies are harder to bury than people. Jung would call this a psychic projection. The act of assigning parts of ourselves, especially the parts we've buried or denied, to another person. We look at them and see more than they are, not because they've earned it, but because we've handed them the pieces of ourselves we don't know how to hold. And when they leave, it feels like they've taken those pieces with them. But here's the paradox. They never truly had those pieces to begin with. They were always yours. The journey ahead, the one you might not want to take, but need to, will not be about forgetting them. It will be about reclaiming what you gave away. It will be about understanding why you placed your worth in their hands in the first place. This is not easy work. It's not glamorous. It won't happen overnight. But if you want freedom, real, lasting freedom, you will have to look in the mirror they left behind and decide to face what you see. So here's the first truth you need to accept. You do not miss them. You miss the feelings you thought they created in youth's safety, the belonging, the validation. But those things were never truly theirs to give. And as long as you believe they were, you'll keep searching for someone else to give them to you. The real work is learning how to give those things to yourself. That's where this journey begins. Not in erasing their memory, but in dismantling the illusion. Not in waiting for them to come back, but in understanding why you wanted them so badly in the first place. Because the day you stop chasing ghosts is the day you stop being haunted. And that, more than anything, is the beginning. of your liberation. The trap of projection. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself why you stay connected sometimes? Desperately to someone who clearly doesn't do you any good? Why, even when the reality of abuse, manipulation, and neglect is undeniable? Something inside you keeps whispering, just one more chance. It's tempting to believe the answer lies in the other person, that it's their charm, their beauty, or some rare quality you just can't replace. But the truth is far stranger and far more personal. The answer lies inside you, buried deep in your unconscious. Carl Jung did not see relationships as simple exchanges between two people. For him, every emotional bond, especially the intense and painful ones, was a mirror. When we fall in love, we are not seeing the person as they truly are. We are projecting onto them hidden parts of ourselves, parts we do not yet understand, or parts we have been taught to hide. This is what Jung called psychic projection. Think of it as holding up a movie projector toward another human being. On the screen of their existence, you cast images of what you believe they are images made, not of their truth, but of your longings, your fears, your buried desires. It's not that they are empty or without substance. It's that you are filling in the gaps of their personality with pieces of your own soul. You're not loving them for who they are. You're loving what they represent to you, sometimes without even realizing it. You project onto them the animus or the animeung's archetypes of the inner masculine and feminine that live in every human being. These archetypes represent the qualities we feel are missing in ourselves. When we see someone who appears to embody these qualities, we feel drawn to them, as if they complete us, at first. This projection can feel magical. You admire them, idealize them, see them as larger than life. You believe they are the answer to a question you didn't know you were asking. And for a while, they might even play the role you've unconsciously assigned them. But inevitably, reality steps in. The mask slips. The illusion cracks. They say something cruel. They disappoint you. They fail to live up to the idealized image you've built around them, and that's when the trap begins to tighten. Instead of accepting the truth that they are simply human and never were the flawless figure you imagined, you cling harder to the fantasy. You tell yourself they're just going through something. If I love them enough, they'll become who I know they can be. You ignore your own needs. You explain away the red flags. Little by little, you begin to accept less and less from them. You start living on crumbs. You justify neglect, make excuses for disrespect, and silence the voice inside you that says this is wrong. You call it loyalty. You call it love. But in truth, it's dependency, not on the person, but on the emotional high you get from glimpses of your projection coming to life. Here is the problem. Projection turns love into possession and connection into captivity. You'll become less interested in who they truly are, and more obsessed with maintaining the image of them that exists only in your mind. It's like trying to keep a painting perfect in a storm. The wind tears at it, the rain smears it, but you keep rushing to repair it. Convinced that if you can preserve the image, you'll preserve your happiness. But no matter how hard you try, the real person will never match the masterpiece you've imagined. And the harder you cling to the image, the more you lose sight of yourself. Why does this happen? Because, deep down, you've been conditioned to believe that the missing parts of you must be found in someone else. The world has taught you that love is about finding your other half, and so you walk around with a quiet ache, scanning every face for the one who will complete you. Projection is your unconscious mind's way of saying, there, the missing piece. But it's a trick. The piece was never missing, it was simply buried inside you, waiting to be claimed. Until you understand that, you will keep searching outside yourself for what you already carry within. And each time, you'll fall into the same cycle. You project, they fall short. You justify, you lose yourself. Different face, same story. Jung warned that until we integrate these hidden parts of ourselves, we will repeat the same patterns, drawn to the same types of people, over and over. This isn't bad luck, it's unconscious destiny. Think about your past relationships. Do you notice a pattern? Maybe you keep attracting emotionally unavailable people. Maybe you're drawn to narcissists or chronic manipulators. Or maybe you find yourself endlessly trying to fix those who can't or won't change. These patterns are not random. They are clues pointing toward the qualities you have disowned in yourself. Here's the uncomfortable truth. You may be drawn to the emotionally unavailable because they mirror the parts of you that withhold affection from yourself. You may be drawn to the manipulator because they express the control you've been too afraid to claim in your own life. You may be drawn to the selfish because you've been taught that your own needs don't matter. Projection is cruel in this way. You love in them what you've abandoned in yourself, and you hate in them what you cannot accept in yourself. And until you face those truths, you will keep choosing the same emotional prison, just with different walls. Breaking free from projection doesn't mean never falling in love again. It doesn't mean avoiding people or relationships. It means learning to see people as they aren't, as screens for your unhealed parts. It means asking, do I love this person for who they are, or for who I hope they will become? Am I truly seeing them, or am I seeing a reflection of my own longings? Would I still choose them if they never changed? The answers may be painful, but they will set you free. The trap of projection is that it feels so much like love. It feels intoxicating, magnetic, fated. But love that depends on someone living up to your fantasy is not love. It's an emotional contract with your own shadow. The real liberation comes when you begin to reclaim the qualities you've been outsourcing to others. When you stop seeking your missing pieces in someone else's pocket. When you realize that no one can complete you because you were never incomplete, so the next time you feel that magnetic pull towards someone, especially someone who feels too perfect, pause. Ask yourself if you're falling for them or for the part of you you've been too afraid to meet. Because when you can hold those parts, self, without needing someone else to carry them, you stop projecting and you start loving. Not from a place of need, but from a place of wholeness. And that is the kind of love that doesn't trap you. It frees you. The mask that suffocates you. Somewhere along the line, you learned that being yourself was not enough. Maybe it happened in childhood when the approval you craved came only when you were obedient, helpful, or impressive. Maybe it was in adolescence, when acceptance seemed tied to performance grades, looks, achievements. Or maybe it came from heartbreaks that taught you to shrink, to hide the parts of yourself that scared people away, one way or another. You absorbed the lesson. To be loved, you must earn it. And so, you began to build the mask. Carl Jung called it the persona, the face you show the world to gain acceptance and avoid rejection. This mask is not inherently bad. In some ways, it's necessary. We all adapt to the social world. We all present ourselves in ways that make connection easier. But when the persona becomes a prison, when the mask is worn so tightly that you forget what's underneath, that's when you begin to suffocate. At first, wearing the mask feels like a skill. You know what to say, how to act, how to be exactly what someone else needs in that moment. You adjust yourself to fit. You read the room, and you play the part. In relationships, this ability to adapt becomes your default survival strategy. You suppress your opinions when they might cause conflict. You downplay your needs so you won't seem too much. You laugh at jokes that hurt you just to keep the peace. You convince yourself this is love's selflessness, compromise, devotion. But deep down, you know it's fear. Fear of being left. Fear of being seen and rejected. Fear that if you let the mask slip, the person you care about will turn away. The tragedy is that, over time, you lose touch with the parts of yourself the mask was meant to protect. Your own wants become strangers to you. Your real voice grows quiet. You can't tell whether you like something because you like it, or because you've learned it will please someone else. And in emotionally dependent relationships, this erasure of self becomes complete. You begin to measure your worth entirely by the other person's reactions. A smile from them makes you feel alive. A frown makes you feel worthless. Silence becomes unbearable, not because silence is painful in itself, but because it leaves you without a mirror to tell you who you are. This is the root of the validation cycle. You've learned to locate your identity in someone else's eyes. And because you've shaped yourself to please them, their approval becomes the oxygen you breathe. Here's the cruel twist. No matter how much validation they give, it will never be enough. Because the part of you receiving it is not the real you, it's the mask. Compliments for the mask never satisfy the soul. It's like trying to quench a deep thirst by pouring water on the outside of a sealed bottle. That's why, even when someone says, "You're amazing," you might feel a flicker of joy, followed quickly by emptiness. Because somewhere inside, you know they are admiring a performance, not the truth. It's exhausting, isn't it? To keep wearing a version of yourself you know isn't whole. To silence your own voice so completely that you forget what it sounds like. To trade authenticity for acceptance and call it love. In time, this disconnection from self breeds anxiety. Every absence from them becomes a collapse. Every unanswered message feels like a rejection of your existence. Every small criticism cuts like a knife because it threatens the fragile identity you've constructed around being enough for them. You may think you're terrified of losing them, but the deeper truth is this. You're terrified of facing yourself without the mask, because what if you look underneath and find nothing? What if the real you has been buried too long? Here's the secret most people never tell you. The real you isn't gone. It's waiting. It's been watching from behind the mask all along, quietly asking when you'll let it breathe again. And this anxiety you feel, not your enemy. It's a signal. It's the soul's alarm clock, ringing to tell you something is deeply out of balance. It says, you have abandoned yourself to keep someone else close. It says, the mask has become too heavy. It says, it's time to remember who you were before. You needed to pretend. Anxiety in toxic relationships is not random. It is the voice of your true self fighting to be heard over the false self you've built for survival. It's the tightness in your chest when you agree to something you don't want. It's the racing heartbeat when you sense rejection looming. It's the ache in your stomach when you realize you're more invested in being accepted than in being authentic. Can't every time you swallow your feelings to avoid rocking the boat, you feed the mask. Every time you say, I'm fine, when you're not, you fortify the prison walls. And the more you feed the mask, the more starved your real self becomes. Eventually, you might forget where the mask ends and you begin. That's the moment of crisis. When you realize you've built a life that may look stable from the outside, but feels hollow inside. And it's at this point that some people cling even harder to the mask. They double down on being what others want, because removing it feels like stepping into the unknown. But the cost of keeping it on is higher than the risk of taking it off. The work ahead is not about destroying the mask entirely. It has its place. We all need a public face sometimes, but it is about loosening its grip. It's about letting your true self breathe in relationships, even if it means risking disapproval. It's about asking, what do I want, not what would make them happy. If I could say anything without fear, what would I say? When was the last time I felt fully myself in someone's presence? You may find the answers uncomfortable. You may discover that the people who love your mask don't love the person beneath it, and that will hurt. But it will also set you free, because the ones who stay after the mask comes off will be the ones who truly see you. And there is no greater relief than being loved for who you are, not for the role you've played. The truth is, the mask may have once saved you, but now it's keeping you trapped in relationships where love is conditional and acceptance is fragile. Your real self deserves more than crumbs of affection traded for self-erasure. It deserves a life where you can exist without constantly performing, without living in fear that authenticity will drive people away. And here's the final irony. When you start showing up as your full self, you may find you no longer need the people you once thought you couldn't live without. because their approval was only ever a substitute for your own. The mask that once seemed like your lifeline is, in truth, the chain around your neck. And the moment you choose to take it off not for them, but for you, you take your first breath of freedom. The shadow's silent control. You think you're choosing the people you love. You think you're deciding, with conscious intention, who gets to enter your life. But what if I told you that, most of the time, it's not you making the choice at all? What if it's the deepest, most hidden part of your mind, the part you rarely acknowledge that is silently guiding your hand? The part that knows your fears, your secrets, and your wounds better than you do. Carl Jung called this part the shadow. The shadow is everything about yourself that you've been told is unacceptable: anger, desire, selfishness, vulnerability, ambition, everything you've been taught to hide in order to be loved. You didn't erase these parts. You buried them. But what's buried doesn't die. It waits. And when it emerges, it doesn't do so in the daylight of your conscious choices. It creeps out in the dark corners of your relationships, pulling you toward people who mirror your unacknowledged self. That's why you may find yourself drawn, again and again, to the same type of person, someone who wounds you in a way that feels painfully familiar. The faces change, but the pattern remains. The emotionally unavailable partner, the charming manipulator, the narcissist who shines at first, then erodes your sense of worth, and you ask yourself, why does this keep happening? To me, you call it bad luck, or fate, or chemistry. But it's not luck, it's the shadow at work. Here's how it happens. Your shadow contains every part of you that you have disowned, denied, or decided is wrong. Maybe you were taught that anger was dangerous, so you buried it. Maybe you were told that wanting attention made you selfish, so you learned to make yourself invisible. Maybe you were taught to be endlessly giving, so you hid any impulse to take. The shadow doesn't just hold the bad parts, it also holds your power, your boundaries, your right to exist fully. And because you've buried these qualities, you're magnetically drawn to people who carry them openly, sometimes in toxic, destructive ways. Think about it. If you've denied your own need for control, you may find yourself with someone controlling. If you've buried your desire to be seen, you may fall for someone who commands attention but rarely gives it to you. If you've repressed your own self-protection, you may end up with someone who protects themselves at your expense in them. You see qualities you've been taught to fear in yourself. You may hate these qualities, but you also can't look away. That's the shadow's pullets trying to get you to see the parts of yourself you've abandoned. It's a cruel game, because until you recognize what's happening, you'll keep playing it. You'll keep chasing people who activate the very wounds you've never healed, all in the hope that this time, if you can make them love you, the wound will close. But the wound won't close not that way. You can't heal your shadow through someone else's approval. You can only heal it by turning toward it yourself. This is why projection and the shadow are so deeply connected. In Chapter 2, we explored how we project idealized parts of ourselves onto others. The shadow is the other side of that coin. It's the parts we can't bear to admit we have. The parts we project in the opposite direction. You might despise in them what you can't accept in yourself. You might adore in them what you've been forced to abandon in yourself. Either way, the relationship becomes less about who they are and more about what they reflect back to you. Let's say you're drawn to someone emotionally distant. At first, you might see them as mysterious, self-assured, independent, but over time, that distance becomes painful. You try harder, give more, twist yourself into shapes to close the gap. What you may not realize is that their distance mirrors your own. Not your distance from them, but your distance from yourself. You've been emotionally distant from your own needs for years. They're simply embodying what you already practice, inwardly neglecting your own heart. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Part of the chaos in your relationships comes from you. Not because you want to be hurt, but because your shadow is looking for a stage. Relationships are its favorite stage. Because they are intimate enough to trigger your deepest wounds and close enough to force you to confront them. You're willing. But most people aren't willing, at least not at first. It's easier to blame the other person. It's easier to tell yourself, if I just find someone different, this will stop. But until you meet your shadow, you'll keep finding the same pattern with a new face. Jung said, what you resist persists. What you accept transforms. Facing the shadow means acknowledging that you have anger, control, selfishness, jealousy, vulnerability, and that none of these things make you unworthy of love. It means reclaiming the parts of yourself you've shamed into hiding, so they no longer need to appear in the form of partners who hurt you. This doesn't mean you excuse toxic behavior from others. It doesn't mean you tell yourself, well, they're just my shadow, so I should stay. No. Facing the shadow is not about justifying abuse. It's about understanding why you were drawn to it in the first place and learning to walk away before it consumes you, because the shadow, once integrated, loses its control. When you own the qualities you've buried, you stop needing someone else to carry them for you. The work begins with questions. Questions most people are too afraid to ask. What do my relationships reveal about the parts of myself I've denied? What traits do I find intolerable in others, and why? What am I drawn to that I'm afraid to claim for myself? These questions are not easy. The answers may sting. You may have to admit that some of what you've called love was really an attempt to outsource your shadow. You may have to face the fact that the people who've hurt you were holding up mirrors you didn't want to look into. But here's the liberation. Once you see your shadow, you can stop letting it choose for you. You can choose partners from a place of clarity, not compulsion. You can stop trying to heal old wounds by bleeding into new ones. You can recognize when attraction is really a warning. You can feel the pull towards someone who mirrors your shadow and still say, no, I see the pattern. I choose differently this time. Integrating the shadow is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. It's about holding both your light and your darkness in the same hands, without shame, because when you do, you stop needing someone else to complete you, and you stop tolerating anyone who tries to control you by holding pieces of you hostage. That's when relationships stop being prisons and start becoming choices. And that is the moment your shadow stops being your silent master and becomes your greatest teacher, becoming whole again. There comes a moment when you can no longer live split in two, when the mask you've worn for years cracks under its own weight, and the shadow you've ignored stops whispering and starts shouting. It's the moment you realize you've been performing your life instead of living it, chasing people who can't give you what you've been withholding from yourself. This moment is not gentle. It is not comfortable. But it is the moment real healing begins. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the psychological journey of becoming whole, of integrating every part of yourself so you are no longer a puppet of your wounds, your projections, or your shadow. It's the process of finally becoming who you truly are, free from masks, free from unconscious chains. Individuation doesn't begin with beauty. It begins with confrontation. You will have to look at the insecurities you've been hiding. You will have to admit the patterns you've been repeating, the ways you've been complicit in your own suffering, not because you wanted to suffer, but because you didn't yet know another way to live. You will have to see how your identity has been shaped by the need for approval, the fear of rejection, the longing to be chosen, and you will have to let go of the fantasy that the people hurt you will one day come back and give you closure. They won't. The closure you've been waiting for is already inside. It just requires courage to claim it. Individuation begins the moment you stop asking, "How can I keep them?" And start asking, "Why do I abandon myself to keep them close?" It's the moment you realize that every time you beg for love, you're handing over a piece of yourself. And every time you accept less than you deserve, you're teaching your soul that it's not worth more. These are painful realizations, but they're also the key to unlocking the door you thought was locked from the outside. Reclaiming yourself happens in small, deliberate acts. The first time you set a boundary and keep it, the moment you choose silence instead of pleading for attention, the day you say no, not out of defiance, but out of self-respect. Each of these moments is a thread, weaving back together the parts of you that have been scattered. Every choice to honor yourself is an act of remembering. You stop being the person shaped by absence and start becoming the person who can stand whole living in solitude. Here's the most powerful shift when you return to your center. The other person stops being your salvation. You no longer need their approval to feel worthy. You no longer need to beg for affection to feel alive. You no longer chase them as if they're the missing half of you, because you've discovered you were never missing half. You simply stopped inhabiting yourself. Now you're coming home. But becoming whole again is not just about leaving toxic relationships. It's about breaking the bond with the illusions that kept you there. You must release the belief that your worth is something to be proven. You must grieve the fantasy of what you thought the relationship could be. And you must understand that letting go is not forgetting, it's choosing not to live in chains made of memory. Letting go hurts. It will feel like tearing away a piece of yourself. But the pain you feel is not the loss of them. It's the release of the false self you built to keep them. This pain is sacred. It is the pain of rebirth. When you let go, you are not erasing the chapter. You are simply deciding that it does not get to write your ending. You are choosing to put down the anchor that has been dragging behind you, slowing every step. You are choosing to occupy the space in your life that used to be filled by someone else's absence. You are choosing to see yourself as whole, not in theory, but in practice, and this is where your power returns. When you are whole, you are no longer pulled into relationships that mirror your wounds. You are no longer seduced by the high of intermittent validation. You can see clearly when attraction is really a warning sign. You are no longer available for love that requires you to shrink. You can look someone in the eye, feel the pull of old patterns, and still say, "No, I choose differently now." Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Becoming whole is that privilege. It is the act of walking back through your own story and collecting every part of yourself you left behind, the voice you silenced, the boundaries you abandoned, the dreams you traded for approval. It is becoming both the one who was wounded and the one who heals. It is forgiving yourself for the years you spent chasing love that wasn't love. And it is deciding, Gaku, with full clarity, that you will not spend another year begging for the affection you can give yourself when you are whole. You stop needing to be chosen because you have already chosen yourself. You stop fearing rejection because you know your worth does not live in someone else's hands. You love differently, not from hunger, but from fullness. Not to complete yourself, but to share yourself. And when someone walks away, you do not collapse. You do not crumble. You stand. Because you know they can only take what you give. And you no longer give yourself away in pieces. The path to becoming whole again is not a straight line. Some days you will feel unshakable, and other days you will be tempted to go back to what's familiar. Healing is not about never looking back. It's about knowing why you're moving forward, and forward is the only direction that leads you home. So ask yourself, right now, what do I need to release to finally set myself free? Write it down. Say it out loud, bury it, burn it, or throw it into the ocean. Mock the moment. Make it real. Because every act of letting go is a declaration to yourself. I am mine again. This is not selfishness. This is integrity. Because as long as you keep trying to save broken bonds, you will always be moving away from your own salvation. The truth is, you will always carry scars from the places you've been hurt. But scars are not signs of weakness. They are proof of survival, and every scar you own becomes a thread in the tapestry of the person you are becoming whole. unmasked, unbound, the day you realize you do not need those who hurt you to feel alive is the day you truly begin to live. Becoming whole, again, is not a destination. It is a daily choice, a choice to live in your truth without masks, without shackles, without the patterns that once defined you. It is the choice to walk through the world knowing that you are already enough. That you are always enough. And that no one can take that from you again. And that, more than anything's freedom.